Greetings, friends, haters of prescription medicine, the weary, the sick, the infirm, the open-minded, the progressives amongst us. I'm Dr. Peter Glidden. Thank you for tuning in. This is Fire Your MD Now, and I have to make a confession. I am guilty of ad hominem. Ad hominem is a fancy schmancy Latin term when you condemn somebody who is a member of a profession and the profession at large has done something wrong, but maybe this person hasn't done it, but they're a member of that profession. It's guilt by association. I am guilty of it. Every MD in the United States is guilty by association as far as I'm concerned. The allopathic medical industry, which MDs are members of, which is what MDs are, the Allopathic Medical Association is made up of MDs. Whether they're members of the AMA or not, it doesn't matter. They are allopathic physicians. And as a group, they have gone out of their way to put members of my profession in jail. As a group, they have gone out of their way to suppress medicine, make their status the top dog, prevent other systems of medicine from being used, delivered, disseminated in the United States. Therefore, if you are an MD, you are on my bad list, period. Now, there might have been good Germans during World War II. There might have been Germans who knew what the Nazis did. They weren't Nazis, but they knew what they did, and they didn't do anything to stop it. Am I going to give those people a pass? No. Nor am I going to give anybody with an MD after their name a pass. Why? Because they are members of a profession that has gone out of its way to put my colleagues and myself in jail. And their therapeutics are the leading cause of death. I'm taking an extreme stance with this show in order to create a noise, in order to create a buzz, in order to snap you out of it. Because this ship is on fire. The ship of health, the health of our citizens in the United States is on fire. We are burning to death. And there's nobody saying anything about it. We're all lying on the deck chairs waiting for our next prescription. We're all hanging out in the bar on the ship, giving our money to the bartender to give us more access for health insurance premiums, to give us more access to the leading cause of death in the United States, the type of medicine that has failed to make a dent in heart disease, the system of medicine that has failed to make a dent in cancer, the system of medicine which has shortened our life expectancies, increased Alzheimer's disease, increased autism. Now, you want to give those people a pass, go right ahead. Again, your MD might be the nicest person in the world, might be a fantastic human being, might be a good Catholic, might be a good Buddhist, might work for Doctors Without Borders, might donate hundreds of hours of free time a year, might, live in a shack and donate all of his money from all of his income to feed the homeless, might be a most excellent person. And they support and promote a medical profession which is monopolizing medicine and which is the leading cause of death in the United States and which has you under its thumb. It's time we all collectively snapped out of it. Now, I do know a handful of MDs who have canceled their MD license. They don't practice MD medicine anymore, and they became naturopathic physicians. They don't refer to themselves as MDs anymore. They refer to themselves as naturopathic physicians. That's what their license is. Those people are A-OK in my book. Really, there needs to be a line. There's a line, ladies and gentlemen. We've become so politically correct in the last 20 years in this country, 30 years in this country. It's nuts. You can't say a bad thing about anybody. Oh, Dr. Glidden, you're way over the top. Oh, you can't say anything bad about those guys. Well, yes, I can. It was Christ. What did Christ do? Did he did he give the money lenders a pass? Did he sit down and, have a cup of coffee with the money lenders? Did he talk to them patiently about what they were doing on the steps of the temple? No. He made a noise, overturned the tables, made a ruckus, made a statement. That's exactly what I'm doing. It's time to wake up, ladies and gentlemen. The MDs are killing you. Literally. The leading cause of death. And it doesn't get any more extreme than the MD understanding of heart disease and cholesterol. So let's get into it. Now, here are the statistics for heart disease. 100 years ago, heart disease was the #1 killer in the U.S. 50 years ago, it was the #1 killer in the U.S. Today, it's the #1 killer in the U.S. In 2006, 631,636 people died from it. 27% of the people who die in the United States, 1 in 4, die from heart disease. And the medical industry profits approximately $444 billion with a B dollars. $444 billion is what they profit ineffectively treating your heart disease. Ineffectively treating your heart disease, and you give them your hard-earned money in the form of health insurance premiums to gain access to this type of medicine that doesn't work. But I'm not through. Cholesterol. There's a big bugaboo about cholesterol. This is it's not a very complicated subject, but it's not an easy subject to understand. A gentleman that I used to be friends with, John Abramson, he's an MD. He still is an MD, so he's on my do not fly list. Wrote a pretty good book. It's called Overdosed America. John Abramson is a naturopathic doctor in disguise. I don't know why he doesn't turn in his MD degree. You know, I think he doesn't want to lose a paycheck. That's what I think. I've never had a conversation with the guy about it. But, you know, that's my line, and I've drawn it, and I'm sticking to my guns. But he wrote a book. It's called Overdosed America. It was a New York Times bestseller. And he has a chapter all about cholesterol. It's called The Smoking Gun. If you are a bean counter, if you are a detail-oriented person, if you have any inclination, any interest in science at all, get this book, read it. Well, actually, try to get it from the library so you don't give Abramson any money. Get it from the library somewhere. Borrow it somewhere. You know, buy it and then sell it back after you're done. Or donate it to the library so other people can read it without having to pay for it. He has an excellent chapter called The Smoking Gun. It talks about all of the historical nuts and bolts relative to the cholesterol myth, and it is a myth. It all started in 2001. An expert panel on detection, evaluation, and treatment of high blood cholesterol in adults issued perhaps the most influential document in the history of a modern American medicine. Their recommendations were that they needed to triple the amount of statin drugs. They needed to triple the amount of statin drugs which were being prescribed in order to attempt to reduce heart disease. That was their findings. That if we reduce cholesterol and LDL, which is supposed to be the bad cholesterol, that by reducing cholesterol and LDL, they can remarkably make a dent in how much heart disease is happening. It was a big deal, and it is that study in 2001, which was based on data from something called the Framingham Heart Study, that made all of this cholesterol-lowering statin drug nonsense take off. One study, the Framingham Heart Study. Interestingly enough, 1 year almost to the day after that study was published and medical doctors started beating the war drums for lowering total cholesterol, there was another study that was published. It was called the ALHAT study. The ALHAT study enrolled more than 10,000 patients at high risk of coronary heart disease, equal numbers of men and women, 55 years and older, whose risk factors for heart disease would have qualified about 90% of the men and 75% of the women for the statin drug therapy that all the doctors were crazy about. And that study conclusively proved that tripling the number of people on statin drugs neither prevented heart disease nor decreased the overall risk of death. There was no benefit to increasing the number of patients taking statin drugs beyond the norm. Not for people aged 55 to 64, not for people 65 and older, not for men, not for women, not for those with or without diabetes, not for those with or without heart disease, and not for those with LDL cholesterol higher or lower than 130 milligrams. The only group that benefited from tripling the statin drugs were blacks. African Americans who had fewer episodes of heart disease but no fewer deaths. Unbelievable. And then they did another study called the Prosper Study. This looked at statin drug use in the elderly. The study tested the effects of statin therapy. Statin drugs, of course, are the cholesterol-lowering drugs on high-risk elderly patients between the ages of 70 and 82. Those patients who did not already have heart disease, statin therapy did not reduce the risk of developing heart disease or stroke. It did, however, significantly increase the risk of developing cancer. So if you're elderly, don't take a statin drug. If you're middle-aged, don't take a statin drug. By the way, yeah, that's the tip of the iceberg. If you want to go to a really excellent website about this, it's ravenskov.nu. I'll post that on my website by the end of the day. It's R-A-V like Victor, N like Nancy, S-K-O-V like Victor.nu. It's a website. There was a book written by a Russian doctor. His name is Ufi Ravenskov, and he blows this whole statin drug thing completely out of the water. He did a meta-analysis of all of the research ever done on statin drugs, and his conclusion, looking at all of the research ever done in recorded history, statin drugs don't work. A Canadian study followed 5,000 men for 12 years, could not find a link between high cholesterol and heart attack. The Honolulu Heart Program, which was published in 2001, looked at more than 8,000 individuals and made this conclusion. Long-term persistence of low cholesterol increases your risk of death. Ladies and gentlemen, fire your MD now. It is the best thing you can do for your health. I'm Dr. Peter Glidden. I'm taking the gloves off today, ladies and gentlemen. Give me a call, 866-582-9933, and I will tell you how to recover your health. Stay tuned. And we're back. This is Fire Your MD Now with Dr. Peter Glidden, me, your friendly and neighborhood naturopathic physician. Now, I get all worked up, ladies and gentlemen, but I'm really a nice guy. So don't be scared about calling me. I'm not going to bite your head off unless you're an MD. And if you are an MD, I encourage you to call me because I will take off the gloves with you and we'll go back and forth and maybe I can drag you into the light too. Now, a little bit more about cholesterol, right? Follow the money. Statin drugs are big money in the United States. Statin drugs, by the way, are called statin drugs. They are the cholesterol-lowering drugs. Statin drugs are called statin drugs because if they called them liver poison, they'd be harder to sell. Statin drugs work by interrupting a biochemical pathway in your liver because guess what? Cholesterol is so important to the human body that your body makes it. Your body makes cholesterol. All of your sex hormones are made from it. All of your nerve fibers are made from it. Great deal of your central nervous system, including your brain, are made from cholesterol. And all of your sex hormones are made from it, and hormones that regulate blood sugar metabolism. Imagine that. So guess what? When you push cholesterol into the ditch with fat-free diets and statin drugs, your sex hormones dry up. Women get hot flushes for decades. Men get erectile dysfunction. Big deal, right? Not so much of a big deal. Big deal. Not so much of a big deal. All of a sudden, we need Cialis, right? And what's the other one? I'll think of it in a minute. All of a sudden, we need sex performance drugs because we're drying up our cholesterol with fat-free diets, exercise, and statin drugs. That's why Alzheimer's has risen from obscurity to the 6th or the 5th leading cause of death in the United States, depending on how you crunch the numbers. Why? Because 95% of the part of the brain that's affected by Alzheimer's disease is made from cholesterol. So I guess it's pretty important to the human body. And when you dry it up with statin drugs, fat-free diets, and exercise, guess what? Your brain's going to dry up. Your sex hormones are going to dry up. You're going to get hot flushes, you're going to get erectile dysfunction, you're going to get Alzheimer's disease, all of which have increased. Alzheimer's, the most remarkable. I mean, the statin drugs were introduced in the 1980s, and before the 80s, in the 70s, Alzheimer's was virtually non-existent. And now it's the 6th leading cause of death. It's been an unbelievable increase in Alzheimer's disease in the last 30 years, 20 years, 32 years. So let me do my math, 32 years. Why is it because of some crazy gene? Is it because of some pesticide in the food? No, it's from statin drugs. This is common sense. This is what we believe. Now, do I have any proof of this? No, but it's common sense. If 95% of the part of the brain that's affected by Alzheimer's is made from cholesterol, and you're taking a statin drug to dry up cholesterol, gee, I wonder if there's a link. And, because medicine in the United States is reductionistic, because it is all Newtonian-based, because it is outdated and old-fashioned and delivered by people who have bitten a big piece out of the dogma pie, they're going to be looking up blind alleys all of the time. This is why there's been no change in heart disease, because MDs are colorblind art critics. They have an a priori, a built-in prejudice that they don't even see. Thinking that cholesterol is what causes clogged arteries, because son of a gun, what are the arteries clogged with? Well, they're clogged with cholesterol. Therefore, cholesterol must be the culprit. Well, that's like thinking firemen cause fires, because son of a gun, the bigger the fire is, the more firemen there are. Or it's like thinking ash causes forest fires, because son of a gun, the bigger the forest fire, the more ash there is. It's nonsense. It's backwards. My colleague, Dr. Wallach, published in 1972 an article that showed that cholesterol buildup in arteries is caused by inflammation of the artery. It's inflammation in the artery that causes damage to the artery. And from our point of view, our belief, our fundamental projected belief is that cholesterol is laid down to protect the artery, to keep you from bleeding out, because what's inside the artery? Blood under high pressure. This is our supposition. We know that cholesterol deposition is caused by inflammation of the arteries, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to put the pieces together. Well, guess what? The body's got tons of cholesterol. It can even make it if it needs more. So if you've got inflammation in the arteries and the artery walls are starting to tear and you're going to bleed to death, guess what? The body's going to lay down cholesterol. This is our working prognosis. And you know what an indication of inflammation in the arteries is? LDL. Don't say it. For goodness sake, I need to have a TV show called Medical Myth-Busting. Like the Mythbusters, they go around busting all these urban myths, how far can you actually shoot a pumpkin, and if you throw a penny up into the air, or if you fire a bullet straight up into the air, when it comes down, is it going to kill you, right? Stuff like this. Well, I need to have a TV show called Medical Myth-Busting. It would be a smash hit, except for the fact that the major networks wouldn't carry it, because the major networks are all funded by the pharmaceutical industry. Oh, by the way, just to finish up the thoughts about clogged arteries being due to cholesterol, it might interest you to know that a study done at the University Hospital in Toronto showed that people with low cholesterol had just as many clogged arteries as people whose cholesterol was high. Cholesterol had nothing to do with it. And I mentioned, again, a Canadian study that was done, followed 5,000 men for 12 years and couldn't find a link between high cholesterol and heart attacks. Couldn't find a link. And the Honolulu Heart Program, published in 2001, looked at 8,000 individuals. Looked at 8,000 individuals and made this statement. Long-term persistence of low cholesterol increases the risk of death. Thus, the earlier patients start to have lower cholesterol concentrations, the greater the risk of death. You got it? Cholesterol is your friend. Your MD is your enemy, unless you're bleeding to death or have a bullet in your arm. But before you let them touch you, have them drug tested. Then you'll be safe. Now, I just posted the link to Ufi Ravenskov's website on my website. It's in the Knowledge is Power box. It's called Cholesterol Myth-Busting. So click on that link. You'll go right to Ravenskov's website. You can read all about it. And it will blow your mind. But let's think about it this way, folks. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure it out. Common sense has gone out the window with, as political correctness has risen up, it's stepping and right on top of and breaking the back of common sense. In 2011, Lipitor was the best-selling drug in the world. Lipitor, touted by Robert Jarvik, the creator of the artificial heart, for goodness sake, as having a significant, being a significant tool in the war against heart disease. Well, guess what? Statin drug sales in 2009, I'm sorry, this is old data, were $25 billion. $25 billion with a B. $25 billion. Statin drugs are the most prescribed drugs in the United States. Now, if heart disease was related to high cholesterol, you would think it would be logical to conclude that after 23 years of statin drug use, fat-free diets, fat is the Antichrist, stay away from fat at all costs, and exercise, 23 years of statin drug, it's actually 30, I'm sorry, I've got my math wrong, 32 years. 32 years of statin drugs, fat-free diets, and exercise. You'd think that heart disease should have changed, right? It hasn't. It's still the number one killer. It's still the number one killer. So, because it doesn't have anything to do with cholesterol. It has everything to do with inflammation from our perspective. Cholesterol deposition in the blood, in the arteries, is caused by chronic, undiagnosed, long-term inflammation in the blood vessels. And by the way, cholesterol doesn't build up in veins. If cholesterol is the culprit and cholesterol is everywhere in the body, why don't you get clogged veins? Because the body doesn't care if you burst a vein. Because veins have low-pressure blood in them. If you burst a vein, nothing bad's going to happen. You're going to get a bruise. That's about it. But if you burst an artery, you're going to bleed to death in about 5 minutes. Depending on where the burst is, maybe 2 minutes. You're going to bleed out. Your body has wisdom. Your medical doctor doesn't believe this. Your medical doctor thinks they are smarter than nature. Your medical doctor thinks that they can march in with a synthetic drug, control the situation, and even when their therapeutics fail, they continue to deliver them because it's a gigantic money maker, and you bend over and take it. So here's what I want you to do. The next time anybody tells you to go on a statin drug, I want you to say, look, doctor, I'm paying you, by my calculations, about $400, $500 an hour. I understand that you are a for-profit entity and that the hospital that you're affiliated with is also a for-profit entity. And I respect making money. I've got no problem with making money. But our relationship, my relationship with you, has become colored by money. And because it's a professional relationship, and because it's a for-profit relationship, I'm shopping for the best medical care I can get. So therefore, I want you to provide me with the literature which supports your delivering statin drugs to my body. I want to see it. I want to see the research. I want to see the numbers. I want to see the pros and cons. And I want to talk to your patients who've been on statin drugs for more than 20 years, see what their level of health is and how they're doing. And I'd like to have all of this by 3 o'clock this afternoon. Have your secretary work on this. And if you can't provide me with this information, I'm going down the street. Now, your medical doctor won't care because there are so many people needing health care. He'll just kick you out and next. Because they're only going to spend 2 minutes with you anyway. This is what happens when a monopoly occurs. When there's a monopoly, it's bad for everybody except the people running the monopoly. It's good for them. They don't care. There's so many people that are sick and suffering. There's so many sheeple in this country that'll do anything that a person with a white coat and a stethoscope tells them. They don't care about being correct. They don't care about taking care of you. All they want you to do is what they tell you to do. Pronto. Jump to it, buddy. Don't question the doctor. Well, that's the worst mistake anybody can make. You need to question your doctor. You don't need to be a knucklehead about it. You don't need to be mean-spirited about it. You don't need to be rude. But look, it's a professional relationship. You're paying these guys big money. If you were going to buy, what's the one of the biggest purchases? If you were going to buy a house, right, you're going to buy a house. Would you just go to any realtor, sit down, and have the realtor tell you which house you're going to buy? Oh, I'd like to buy a house. I have $200,000. Well, here, this is the one you're going to buy. Here, sign the papers right now. What? I can't even go into the house? No, this is the house. I'm telling you, this is the house you need to buy. What? I can't even look at the house? No, look, I'm telling you, this is the house you need to buy. What? No, I can't look at the property records. I can't look at the deed. I can't look to see when it was built. I can't even have a walkthrough. I'd like to talk to the other people that lived in the house. No, you can't. Sign the papers now. Well, it's not like that. But that's what it's like with your medical doctor. Because they tell you what to do. And you do it without question. You're as much to blame as they are. But really, they're the ones to blame. Because the way that this culture is set up is that we believe, we have been taught to trust the person in the white coat. I think it was Marcus Welby and MASH. I blame it on those guys and Grey's Anatomy. That's who I blame. And direct-to-consumer ads, Dr. Kildare, if you're old enough to remember who Dr. Kildare is, well, for goodness sake, you're showing your years. But not if you're taking your vitamins. Because if you're taking your vitamins, you're going to be 60, you're going to look 40. You're going to be 70, you're going to look 50. It's like that. By the way, 50 is the new 30. I'm 53 years old, and I don't look it. And if you compare my height and weight and hair color and health to my brothers and sisters who, supposed to have we all have the same genes, right? Unless it was the milkman. No, it wasn't the milkman. We all really do have the same genes. Then we should all have relatively the same amounts of health. Well, we don't. Genetics have very little to do with your overall health. We've bet on the wrong horse, ladies and gentlemen. Again, it's not your fault. You have been enculturated to trust your medical doctor. And, that's just life, I guess. But really, what you don't understand is that the MDs have monopolized the situation so much that they have become the only people, the only go-to people. Everybody else is alternative, right? Oh, they're alternative, which means they must be lower on the totem pole, or their therapeutics must be inferior, or they must not be as good, otherwise they wouldn't be alternative, right? Well, that's like passing a law in the United States that says the only dog that can call itself a dog is a Great Dane, and every other dog is an alternative dog, right? Well, wrong. It's not like that. But this is what we have become enculturated to believe. We just trust that the people wearing the white coats know what's best for us, but they don't. They only know what they've been taught, and what they've been taught is a very small slice of the pie. They don't own medicine. They haven't been taught all there is to know about medicine. They've been taught allopathic, reductionistic, pharmaceutical medicine, which is a branch of Newtonian physics. It's in the greater scheme of things, it's a small piece of the pie. They don't know anything about acupuncture or traditional Chinese medicine or Ayurveda or medical nutrition or homeopathy or chiropractic or old-fashioned osteopathic manipulation. They don't know anything about that. And all of that stuff is 1,000 times better in the treatment of chronic disease than drugs and surgery. You want me to prove it? Look at China. How many billions of people do they have? They've got like 10 times as many people as we do. And they do not have a health care crisis. Why? Because they don't use drugs and surgery for chronic illness. They use acupuncture and herbs, traditional Chinese medicine, Chinese patent formulas. They've got billions of people, and they don't have their economy's not being crushed. They're not shipping jobs overseas because they can't afford to pay their workers a living wage and health care, because their health care costs are in the toilet. Why? Because they don't use drugs. Not the way we do. And yet, we think we're the greatest nation in the world. And, it's this myth of American supremacy. Well, you mark my words, the medical industry is the Titanic. It has already hit the iceberg, and it is starting to sink. Jump off the ship before it's too late. I don't want to see you go down with the ship. And by the way, there's stuff that you can do to fix your health. And that's what we're going to talk about in the next segment. I'm going to segue into it right now we're going to start talking about the 9 foods that everybody should avoid. You can download the list from fireyourmdnow.com, fireyourmdnow.com. Here it is. I'm going to read it to you rapidly. Don't have to worry about writing it down. Just go to the website, click on the link, boom. Pops right into your computer. The magic of the Internet. God, I love it. Okay, here are the 9 foods. I don't even want you to look at these foods, let alone eat them. You ready? Wheat, barley, rye, oats, oil in a bottle, fried food, well-done red meat, nitrates as preservatives added to meat. The most common meats that contain nitrates are bacon, pepperoni, sausage, salami. You can have those meats as long as they don't have nitrates injected into them or sprayed on them. The skins of baked potatoes, yams, and sweet potatoes, that's right, baked potato skins. And last but not least, any carbonated beverage with a meal. Stop it. Bad dog, no biscuit. Stop eating those foods. You'll live long. Maybe I'll even tell you how to prosper, and I'll explain why when we come back from the... So what are we going to do, ladies and gentlemen? Are we just going to lie down and take it? Are we going to continue to give in for-profit insurance companies your hard-earned money to gain access to a system of medicine that doesn't work? No! You're going to snap out of it. You're going to cancel your comprehensive medical insurance. You're going to buy catastrophic insurance instead in case you are in an automobile accident or get a third-degree burn, heaven forbid, break a leg, fall through a plate glass window. And you're going to use the money that you save between the difference in comprehensive medical insurance and catastrophic medical insurance to buy your nutritional supplements. And for free, you're going to educate yourself about good food, bad food. Now, wheat, barley, rye, and oats got to go. Wheat, barley, rye, and oats are bad for you. Wheat, barley, and rye contain gluten. Oats also contain a gluten-like protein. The glutens are in a classification of proteins called prolamines or prolamin. And the name of the bad protein in oats is called avenin, A-V-E-N-I-N, avenin. So there's not any gluten in oats, but there is avenin, which is similar to gluten. And from our point of view, it's the glutens that are problematic, and the prolamines in general. So gluten and avenin are problems. So basically, I don't want you to eat wheat, barley, rye, and oats. Because when you eat those foods, they destroy, damage, gum up the structures in your body which absorb nutrients. And when you destroy the tissue that absorbs nutrients, guess what happens? You become undernutrified. There's not enough nutrition in the food anyway. So the more whole grains you eat, the worse your health is going to get. Imagine that. But I thought whole grains were good. Well, so did Michael Jackson, and that's why he's dead. Michael Jackson's body was so undernutrified and in such trouble he couldn't even absorb medicine. They had to inject it into his veins. He couldn't absorb it because his intestinal tract was shot because he's eaten whole grains for the last 30 years of his life. I know because I met his nutritionist. Oil in a bottle and fried food. Oil contains oil oxidizes. If you drink half a bottle of wine Monday night, and then Tuesday night you go to finish it off, it's turned vinegar if you've left it uncorked. Why? Because it mixes with the air and oxidizes. If you cut an apple and leave it on the tabletop, it turns brown. Why? Because it oxidizes. Steel turns to rust because it oxidizes. Oxidation destroys things. Now, when that olive oil is sitting on the shelf at the grocery store, there's a little bit of air in the top of the bottle, isn't there? You don't know how long it's been sitting there. You don't know how long it's been since it was stuck in that bottle, squeezed out of the olive and stuck in that bottle. It's oxidizing. And as you use it more and more, there's more air in the bottle. It oxidizes faster and faster. And when you heat with it, it oxidizes rapidly. When you consume an oxidized anything, you're pouring into your body little tiny particles called free radicals. And free radicals are like metabolic Velcro. They stick to things and destroy them. And this is why we believe there's so much heart disease, so many clogged arteries in the United States, because everybody is eating foods that are free radical formers or free radical contributors, and it's the food that's causing the inflammation, right? I mean, from the proper perspective, everything makes sense. The biggest culprit in this category, and the reason that African Americans have more heart disease and greater amounts of mortality, is fried food. Fried food contains a chemical called acrylamide. Acrylamide is carcinogenic and pro-inflammatory. Acrylamide is bad for you. That crap will kill you. If you just stop eating fried food, you'd live 5 to 10 years longer. You'd gain 5 to 10 years. And if you look at a map of the United States, the old Confederate states have the shortest life expectancies of anywhere in the U.S. Why? Because in the old Confederate states, if they could, they'd fry water. It's just a part of their culture. It's fried food, breakfast, lunch, and dinner in the Old South. And fried food will kill you. The skins of baked potatoes, yams, and sweet potatoes and well-done meat contain chemicals called heterocyclic amines, which are carcinogenic and pro-inflammatory. So if you're going to eat potatoes, boil them. If you're going to eat red meat, eat it rare or medium rare. And nitrates, when heated, turn into nitrosamines, which are carcinogenic. The moral to this story, and carbonated beverages neutralize stomach acid. So the moral to this story is you're eating all the wrong foods and your body is undernutrified, and that's why you're sick. You've taken the wrong dog for the hunt. Go to Fire Your MD now. Get informed, get your health back, and tune in tomorrow. I'm Dr. Peter Glidden, your steadfast advocate for health. This is Fire Your MD Now.